Sunday school teachers, I'm talking about replacing yourself. Hey there, this is Mike. We're talking about how to replace yourself as a Sunday school teacher. You know, someday you won't be there anymore for a lot of reasons. Someone else will be teaching in that classroom or those kids. Now, I happen to be in a little town here, and there's a great illustration going on. I don't know if you can see the mountains very good behind me. There they are, if we get into a little bit of focus. Okay, this little town in Utah has a glider port, and the airplanes are right now, I did this between planes because they're very noisy, but the planes are pulling the gliders up into the air. They got them, you know, a couple hundred feet of rope, and they pull them way up in the air. They take them way up top, and then they cut them loose. It's a pretty interesting thing, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about that. So stay tuned, and I'll fill in the blanks on how to replace yourself. All right, well, speaking of replacing yourself, I'll have another illustration right here. I am out here in the mountains still. This actually, you can see just a little bit of it. This is the remains of a stagecoach stop out here at what's called Point of Rocks. Interesting little place. And you can see that it has changed over the years. And folks, things do change, and things will be replaced. I can turn the camera just around for you to see kind of what replaced it here. It's kind of hard to see it over there, but right over across the road is the railroad tracks, and this particular stage stop was run by the Overland Stage, which stopped in about 1869, and the reason why is because it was replaced by the train. And Transcontinental Railroad is about 200 yards away from me right here, and that replaced the stagecoach. Interesting bit of history. And then the Transcontinental Railroad, it was replaced, and you can probably see it over there too. All those trucks going by, that is part of the U.S. highway system. That is Interstate 80. And of course the trains for transportation are replaced by automobiles. So everything ends up eventually changing and being replaced. And we want to be good at replacing things. So that's what we're going to talk about in this particular lesson here. Just a couple lessons on how to be good at replacing yourself as a Sunday school teacher or in any ministry position. So anyway, I will catch up with you here again in just a moment. All right. Hey, Mike, back in studio here. Want to share with you a couple of detail things about replacing yourself. It is an obvious truth in life that we're not going to all be here forever, and that we're going to need to be moving on. And so we want to talk about how to do that well. And a lot of people don't know how to do that well. And so give you some of the things here. One of the things is make sure that you don't shun this idea of replacing yourself. Some people think they're irreplaceable, and we'll all learn some lessons in life that is just not true. I remember I had a job once, and I left, and I thought the whole place was going to fall apart, and I came back 6 months later, and they were flourishing and doing great. And it was a very eye-opener to me that there are other people that can think and figure out things other than me, you know. And sometimes in the ministry, we kind of get that way. We're just like, I'm the one that started this or created this, or I know these kids better than anybody else, and I'm the only one that can do it. And we just need to make sure that we kind of push back on that, and that other people can do those things. The other thing that I wrote down is this is not just an act of delegation. In other words, replacing yourself isn't just bringing someone in and like, you do this task for me, you know, while I, you know, step away for vacation weekend or whatever. But this is truly replacing yourself and moving way beyond delegation. Now, delegation is an important part of it, and we'll cover some of that. But let's just jump into a couple of things here. We want people to replace, we want to be replaced by folks that really own the job. Okay, in other words, it is theirs. They grab hold of it, and they're not just, you know, like a substitute teacher in school where a sub comes in for a few days or whatever, but someone that's really grabbing it. And that when we start to kind of turn over that idea of like, you're going to own this, that sends some really good vibes through the whole organization. One of the problems churches have often is not coming up with enough volunteers. We just don't have enough volunteers to do everything everything. And when we get this mentality of we're going to replace ourselves and we're going to train someone to take over, that really sends a good flavor through everything. And it's not something that is like, oh, you can never work your way up in that church, or you'll never be a leader in that church. There's only room for a few at the top, that type of thing. So it's really a good thing. It is essential to that volunteer culture to kind of get that going. And the other thing I had in my note, and then I'll give you like 3 ways to do this, is that it needs to be something that we intentionally do. It's not like, uh-oh, I'm getting ready to retire, or uh-oh, I've got to be gone, or uh-oh, I have a health issue and I got to get someone to replace myself. It needs to be intentional from the beginning, and it needs to be something that we do with planning and organization and deliberation, and it is talked out. Now, if you are in a place as a Sunday school teacher in your organization, the replacing yourself is going to have some ties to the upper level. In other words, there's going to be some people that have some ideas of who can replace you and who shouldn't replace you. And there's sometimes things that pastors and other staff people kind of know what's going on. So you have to kind of create some open dialogue on that, where you start to talk and say, hey, I really need some help in these classes, and I'm not going to be here forever, and I got a couple ideas, and here's what I'd like to do. And listen carefully to your leaders there as they kind of help. And then if you are a leader, it's like sometimes we kind of put the kibosh on everybody because they're not perfect in so many ways. And I think that we just have to really let people to develop and to grow and to mature and to become great workers. I got a call this week from a guy that years ago was in our ministry, and I remember the first time we turned him loose and let him did some things. We were like, oh boy, okay. He had a lot of zeal, but not a lot of knowledge, if you know what I'm talking about. You've probably run into those folks, and he had all sorts of excitement. He could get kids wound up, but he wasn't going anywhere with them. And now he's in a senior position. We'll just leave it at that. He's doing a great job and has trained all sorts of people, and that was years ago. And now, years later, he's doing a great job. And so watching people to develop and watching them mature and watching them. And I'm sure, like in that glider illustration, when the guy was, up there pulling those gliders up in the air, the guy that was pulling is probably like, well, I hope this guy can land that plane. Be their first time. Nobody wants to see a plane wreck, okay? But they've had a lot of practice. They've been through a lot of things, and they won't step up until we step away. So let me give you a couple of things that we do at our church. It really is helpful with training people to replace ourselves. And one is that on a regular basis, your classroom needs to have some other helpers in there that come in, and we often call them shadows. In other words, they're just coming in to kind of shadow and sort of watch the class. They're not doing anything the first a few weeks. It's someone that maybe you've handpicked, and someone's shown some interest working with kids, and you let them kind of sit and learn and see if that is kind of what they're used to. The idea of having a helper in there is helpful as well. And this would usually be someone that's a little bit more straight across, not just like someone like a junior high kid helper that's like going to, get the cookies ready or something for your classroom, but an adult who would be in there, and they would be a helper, and you'd use them for some different things, and they would be in there as an assistant. And here's one of the very important things: whenever you have helpers, whenever you have assistants, usually what happens is we just go, we made it through the day, thanks for your help, we're out of here. But one of the most important things on replacing yourself is the idea of having a little bit of a debrief and a little bit of a conversation there about how to go. What did you like about that? What did you find awkward? What was the challenge for you? And just kind of talking through, because the idea of debriefing and evaluation is essential to any flourishing organization or any piece of organization like a children's ministry. So number one is to make sure that you have some shadows. A second place where those shadows can come from, and actually sort of another sort of a side angle to this whole thing is what we call parental involvement. And that is asking parents to come in and be in the Sunday school classes on a regular basis, and having moms and dads in there and having things for them to do. So they're just not sitting there twiddling their thumbs and watching, but they're actually doing something. So you might have them in a role play position, or you might have them as a helper setting something up. You might have them erasing the board or putting verses on the board, and using them and putting them into that situation. So parental involvement is really, really good. A great way for you to do this, if you're looking for how to get more men involved, is we've often asked our men to come in and give a personal testimony of their salvation, or personal testimony how God answered a prayer, or something remarkable in their life, and we let those adults come in and do that as moms and dads, and do that. And it's a great way to get them involved. And again, if you notice they like it, and afterwards you talk a little bit, say, hey, could you come again in a couple of weeks? We need some help in here. And you're starting to create that volunteer culture. You're starting to create the replace yourself type of thing. So the first one was shadows. The second one is the parental involvement. And then the third one is just this plain old idea of just stepping back. And this is, I've said this over and over and over. It's one of our themes here at Reachkeep. People won't step up until you step away. Okay, they won't step up until you step away, and you have to set a standard so they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But then you need to have some times where you step away. Now, these are smaller at the beginning, where you're like in a Sunday school class, for example, you would have somebody teaching a Bible verse, and maybe you've shown them how to do the verse, and then they've watched you do the verse. They've seen it a couple different weeks. Then you did the verse. They did the verse actually while you were there, and then on this next week, they're gonna, like, when you do the verse, you're gonna tell them, hey, I want you to do the verse. You'll have the kids for about 5 minutes. I need to run up to the front and check on something. And then you step out of the classroom and they are alone in there. Now you're like, could be worried about it, but if you've trained them properly, they're going to do an okay job. And if they're in there alone for the very first time, they really step up, because you stepped away. And so that is the idea of step back. So the step backs can be just 4 or 5 minutes at first. They could be like a 15-minute step back, and then they can actually move into, where you're away for an entire day and you're letting somebody run that class. And of course, they should have an assistant then too, and make sure that things are all, safe and secure in that regard. So you want to do that. The last thing really that has to do with this, for all of this, is the idea of, and I mentioned it before, I mentioned it again, I'll go, evaluation meetings. It's where you sit down, you talk about how it all went. Now, typical evaluation meeting is all the kids walk out of the class and you're kind of straightening up the chairs and you go, hey, how'd it go? And they go, oh, that was kind of fun, and you go, oh, good, and boom, that meeting's over. That is not the right kind of meeting. The best evaluation meetings are after everything is over. You sit down, you say, hey, let's sit down for a minute and go through a couple of things. And, how did you feel about working with that kid there? What was kind of awkward about that situation? Well, when that parent came and said that, you handled that really well. How did you feel you handled it? I thought you did good. And you kind of evaluate little pieces as you go along. You need to take time and evaluate little tiny pieces all the way through the whole thing there when you're doing your evaluation meeting. Evaluation meetings work great after like Sunday night services. They work great, even better on non-Sunday services. Like, hey, let's meet at McDonald's, sit down and talk about it. And you have a dedicated time to talk about the evaluation of how things go. I am a busy guy, so I tend to like cram them in here and there, and they tend to get short, and then they're not effective. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to have super effective evaluation meetings, okay, where you're really training these people the right way. Remember, you're not training just task doers, okay? You're building leaders. Let me say that again. You're not training just a task doer, someone to kind of help you and be your right-hand man, You're training a leader, someone who is going to run with this entire thing. And you're going to need to really focus on that. That's a difficult thing to do. Going back to our first illustration, the glider port was such a neat thing, because I was working on this and I'm watching these this thing be pulled behind on this rope. And I can only imagine, like the guy in the front, we already talked about him. He's like, well, I hope that guy makes it down. But the guy in the back, there's got to be a level of nervousness. There has got to be, something when and I'm not sure if they pull a little trigger and it releases the rope or how exactly that works. But when they cut loose and that airplane, heads back down to land safely with full power, and they're up there catching the breezes and they're just floating along, and it's super quiet from my understanding. If you're in a hot air balloon or a glider, it doesn't make a lot of noise, and the inspection or introspection on your mind must be an amazing kind of thing that is going on, and they're enjoying it all, and then they're figuring out, boy, I gotta land this thing, and that's a challenge. And I can't imagine what it's like, and I guess I would sure love to try it someday. But here's the thing, that once they put that wheel on the ground and they coast that thing to stop, boom, that they are in a different class, that they have now successfully landed it all on their own. And what a great thing that will be. And your teachers will not get to do that if you constantly have them tethered, if you're constantly watching everything. There's got to be a place where you give them the standards, you train them the right way, and then you turn them loose. And then the good thing is you can go do other things too. You can teach another class. You can split that class and have two classes. I mean, there's all sorts of great things. So everything eventually is going to be replaced. The stagecoach disappeared, and the old iron horse came through there, the railroad tracks. And then pretty much the railroad, with the exception of freight, has been replaced by automobiles. And someday that'll all probably be replaced by something too. We don't know, but we know it's going to happen. And so you can be involved in that, and you need to be involved in it. It needs to be intentional and deliberate, and you need to let your students, your people that you're training, let them be the owners of it. And when they land that plane, that glider for that first time, I hope that you are right there popping that cockpit open, looking at them and watching the joy on their face that they did it all, because then you'll know all this training has been worth it. So thank you so much for being with us here. Make sure that this is a YouTube video here. If you would hit the like button, or thumbs up, I think is what the one is. But the main thing is if you subscribe, then you can get this on a regular basis, and you'll get these. But we're doing some great teaching, Sunday school teacher training, and we're grateful for it. And if you'd like some more, just keep hanging around our channel. So thank you so much. This is Mike, and I'm signing out.